Video editing can be time consuming, especially when it comes to the export of the final footage. I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can speed up the exporting process in Adobe Premiere Pro right after this. Handy Hudsonite here. Welcome to my channel. If you're new, I focus on tips, hacks, and reviews so that you can get the job done. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you can get updated whenever I put up videos. Today we're going to look at how to speed up the exporting process in Adobe Premiere Pro. I'm going to be giving you 2 ways to speed up that process, even without upgrading any of your memory or hardware on your machine. This will be applicable for both PCs and Macs in Adobe Premiere Pro CC. So let's get into how to do this. Here I am in Premiere Pro CC. As you can see, I have some footage preloaded into my timeline, and I have this set up to match the settings of the footage for us to begin with. And what we're going to do is we're going to export this footage 3 times. And each time we export it, it should export faster. And I'm going to implement my 2 ways of speeding up this export process after the first time exporting it. So on exports 2 and 3, I will be implementing those techniques. So in order to export this, we are going to just come up here to File and Export. The shortcut would be the Command M or Control M if you're on a PC. Export the media, format of H.264 and YouTube 1080, since we have 1080 footage here. And we're going to just call this Test 1. You'll see that it'll give us the estimated file size of 58 megabytes. This is only a 30-second clip, so it's not that long. And so let's see how long this is going to take to export. So the first export took 52 seconds. Now you'll notice here on the timeline this red line here. This red line indicates that this footage has not been rendered, and we want to be able to render this, and this is the first way that we're going to speed up the export process, is by pre-rendering the footage before we export it. So we'll go to the beginning of the timeline and then to the end of the footage here. At the beginning of the timeline, hit I, the end of the footage, hit O, and this is assuming you have your keyboard set up on the default Premiere setup. If not, you can come up here to the keyboard shortcuts, and you could set your in and outs to something different, but for the sake of this tutorial we will just use the default keystrokes. So I have my footage highlighted here, and there are 2 ways that you can render. You can either render the effects into out or render into out. The rendering into out is probably going to render your footage more thoroughly, so we will choose that. It should just take a few seconds to render this clip. Once the rendering is done, the clip will start playing back automatically. You'll notice now that this line has turned green. Green is for good. This means that the rendering is complete on the footage. Just a note, anytime you make any changes to your footage, it is going to turn this line back to red on where those changes happened. If you do a zoom in on all your footage, it's going to turn back to red, and you'll need to re-render it in order to take full advantage of this exporting speed up. So let's go ahead and hit our Command M or Control M if you're on a PC. Keep the settings the same, but this time we want to use previews because that's going to take advantage of that pre-rendering we did. And so let's find out how much faster this export will be than what we did before. Okay, so this time it took about 47 seconds to export this clip. So we shaved off 5 seconds from the clip. So we saw some savings. Keep in mind this is a 30-second clip, and when you have a much longer clip, let's say 5, 10, 15 minutes, it's going to save you time exponentially on this export. Now the second way that we can speed up the exporting process involves what's called smart rendering. Now in order to set up smart rendering, unfortunately it doesn't work with the MP4 format. We need to come up here to sequence settings, and you'll see that my editing mode right now is to the ARRI Cinema. We are going to want to change this by going up to the top of the menu and clicking Custom. We want to keep it at 30 frames per second, the 1920 by 1080, since that's the size of our footage. The rest can be left the same. Down here under Preview File Format, we need to change this to QuickTime, because that's one of the supported formats for smart rendering. And then under the codec, I prefer using the Apple ProRes 422 HQ. Now Adobe had released information about this smart rendering, and I'll put a link down in the description. And you can see that this Apple ProRes 422 is supported in their smart rendering, and there are other codecs that you can use for the smart rendering if you don't want to use QuickTime, and there are these other ones are supported as well, these other codecs. Okay, we'll come down here. It looks like everything is set. We're going to click OK, and it's going to give us this warning message. It's going to say changes to preview file format or to the preview frame size require all preview files to be deleted. So unfortunately we're going to have to re-render the timeline. So let's come up here again to render into out. Let's go ahead and export this. Now when we export it this time, we cannot unfortunately export it to the H.264 format. We are going to match the sequence settings, which is the QuickTime setting. And here, down here, you'll see the Apple ProRes, and you'll notice these areas are grayed out so that you can't make any changes. We can, however, change this, and we're going to change it to Test 2. And we're going to come down here and use our previews again, since we rendered the timeline. Now let's go ahead and compare how much this is going to save us in time when we export it. So we saw a huge savings in time with this technique, this smart rendering. It went from 52 seconds from a non-rendered timeline export to 47 seconds when we rendered the timeline, down to 21 seconds. So we saw less than half the time it is to export. And again, re-emphasizing that this is 30-second footage, and if you've got 5, 10, 15-minute footage to export, you're going to see gigantic savings on your export time. One caveat when it comes to exporting with the smart rendering is you will suffer a larger file size because it is a .mov file. As I'll show you here, when we go into our properties of this, you'll see it's 754 megabytes for just a 30-second clip compared to a 57 megabyte clip. So the MP4 is definitely going to compress the file much better than the MOV, but if you want to throw the MOV in a conversion program, but again, there you're adding time to the process. And if you're looking at under a 10-minute video, the size is going to be pretty large, but you can still upload it to YouTube. You just have to decide what is more important to you. You can always upload a video overnight, and it will not be any time waster for you at all. But if you're in a hurry to upload the video and you have a higher end machine that can export videos faster, then the MP4 could be the way to go. But if you're dealing with shorter footage, especially, this way of exporting with the smart rendering is the way to go. How do you plan on utilizing these two ways of speeding up the exporting process in Premiere? Be sure to let me know in the comments below, and also any other tips that you have for speeding up the exporting process in Premiere. Put them down in the comments. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. If you want to discover more about the YouTube algorithm, check out this video up here. If you want to learn how to grow your YouTube channel, check out these videos down here. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.